Although largely out of the spotlight right now, Arsen Liliev is a name still held in high regard amongst people considered in the know within the arm wrestling community. Often praised for his meteoric rise in the tournament scene and incredible physical evolution, Liliev's career in arm wrestling is certainly as interesting as they come. With many still questioning his departure from the sport many years later and one of the most juicy controversies I have covered so far, it seems like the perfect time to cover the career of this Russian athlete. I am the Arm Historian, and without further ado, this is the rise and fall of Arsen Liliev. Arsen Liliev was born in May of 1987 in Russia, more specifically in the Republic of North Ossetia, Alania. As a child, like many of his peers, Arsen was primarily interested in wrestling and football, as far as sports went. In his local school during breaks, Arsen could often be found arm wrestling with his classmates, something that was a common pastime in the region at the time. At the tender age of 13, Arsen began looking for local arm wrestling clubs and other gyms in his neighborhood, eager to start his own strength journey. At the age of 15 by 2002, Arsen heard of a club near him called Club Daedalus. At Daedalus, he would start his arm wrestling training under the tutelage of Ibrahim Shotchiev, a high-caliber arm wrestler in his own right. Shotchiev mainly focused on teaching Arsen the basics and rudimentary technical aspects of the sport, but after some time, however, Liliev met someone whose last name had become synonymous with high-level arm wrestling in the region. Meteoric Rise was part of a veritable arm wrestling dynasty and would become Arsen's main coach for many years to follow throughout his youth. Meteoric, his brother Kazbek, and two sons, Kadzimurat and Spartak, are accomplished arm wrestlers and notorious characters within the competitive scene in Russia and beyond. The two family elders had a deep background in weightlifting, which undoubtedly seeped into their rigorous arm wrestling training methods, something that Arsen seemed happy to adopt. Liliev would not only train with the Zoloev family, but would also maintain strong ties with them throughout his entire arm wrestling career. Arm wrestling club Daedalus was well known for producing champions in the sport and had seemingly found its new golden child in the young Arsen. 2 years after joining an arm wrestling club, Liliev made his competitive debut at the Russian National Championships. He ended up coming in first place in the 70kg category, introducing the arm wrestling world to the young force of nature and proving without a doubt the potential present within this young Russian athlete. In 2005, now age 17, Arsen Liliev entered his first international tournament at the European Championships in Bulgaria. His debut on the global scene proved to be a surprise to everyone in attendance, apart from the team that had been training the young talent, of course. Arsen managed to fight his way to the finals in the 75kg category, eventually losing out to an experienced Svetan Gashevsky. His victory in Russian championships and second place at Europeans at such a young age left a long-lasting impression not only on all arm wrestlers present, but also on his native country's sporting federation. These accomplishments led Liliev to being recruited to the Russian national team and granted him the ability to participate in numerous high-stake tournaments, something he eagerly pursued. 1 year on, now in 2006, Liliev would do even better, this time winning both the Russian Nationals and European Championships in his weight class. Although very much underreported in modern sources, but readily available in contemporary ones, in 2007, Arsen would be faced with a moral dilemma and would, as a consequence of his decision, end up embroiling himself in quite a controversy. Arsen and his team were set to compete in the 2007 European Championships, taking place in northern Sweden. When it was time for the first weigh-in, however, Liliev found out to his consternation that he weighed in at about 2 kilograms over the 70kg category. Not wanting to pull a category up, he decided to instead send one of his slightly lighter teammates to make the second weigh-in, under the guise of being Arsen Liliev. The plan probably would have worked too, were it not for the fact that during the second weigh-in, every athlete would have their picture taken. The pictures of participating athletes were subsequently printed out, laminated, and assigned to each one to correctly identify them. During one of Arsen's matches, one of the referees noticed a discrepancy and immediately notified the rest of the WAF about a picture on Arsen's badge not looking even remotely like Arsen. The World Arm Wrestling Federation concluded that the two accused athletes were acting independently of the Russian Sporting Federation and ultimately decided to let both of them off with a warning, citing they would incur a 2-year ban if something similar happened again. To this day, this remains one of the most audacious and ultimately amusing examples of attempted cheating in professional arm wrestling I've ever come across. Seems like this event also served as a tipping point for Arsen as far as his weight went, as later that year he came in first in the 75kg class at the World Championships, and from there would start a nearly unbelievable ascendancy throughout the weight classes. During this time, Arsen would also fill out his frame and started to show the first signs of an impressive physique, geared primarily towards arm wrestling. Arsen was also quickly developing a lethally quick and strong top roll, and seemed to throw himself into every hit with reckless abandon, something that would often result in him careening himself from the table. During the 2008 Worlds, he snagged a silver medal on the left hand and won an impressive gold medal on the right hand, now firmly sitting in the 85kg, or about 190 pounds category. As time went on and slowly marched towards and then into the next decade, it only became more apparent for those keeping a close eye on the Russian Liliev that the man had quickly become a genuine contender for the #1 spot, not only in his own ever-growing weight category, but also as an overall puller. In 2009, he entered the World Championships in Italy as a 90kg athlete and handily won first place, securing yet another notch on his already impressive resume. With the mounting success and popularity of the supermatch format becoming apparent during the following years throughout the globe, and the financial benefits of these events now too hard to ignore, Arsen focused a lot of his efforts into this direction. One such supermatch took place in August of 2009, when at the Istanbul International Friendship Night, Liliev faced off against the notorious American Travis Bagent. Arsen proceeded to absolutely dominate Bagent and outpowered him every round, easily taking the win that night. Another one of these super matches presented itself to Liliev in 2010, where in Istanbul he would face the GOAT himself, John Brzenk. Despite Arsen's explosive power, John managed to make the bout a very close one, but ultimately lost the match to the young Russian 3-2. Although arguably somewhat deserved, this match ended up drawing quite a bit of critique towards Liliev, with many people citing false starts and uncalled elbow fouls as the reason he ultimately won, something that would repeat itself frequently throughout the arm wrestler's career. Another funny side note is that Engin Terzi, now one of the biggest tournament organizers around, served as the referee for the match. A year on, in 2011, Liliev would face yet another legend from the West, this time in Todd Hutchings. Although Hutchings came in seemingly confident and prepared, he must have been surprised when Arsen stepped onto the stage and showcased his by now superhuman-looking physique. Liliev's enormous arms, especially compared to the rest of his already impressive frame, were starting to lead a life of their own on various message boards throughout the internet, with many speculating on how he had achieved such massive gains in only a few years. Arsen's incredible power ended up leading to a win versus Hutchings, with the Russian's only losses in the match coming from self-induced elbow fouls, and him ultimately being declared the winner of a very stacked International Arm Fight World Cup. In order to secure more financial stability for himself, something that seemed to have driven a lot of the decisions Liliev made in his career, Liliev had agreed to represent another region within Russia in his sporting endeavors. The city of Samara had approached Arsen with an offer that was seemingly too good to refuse, resulting in him now representing the Volga region. Although one can hardly blame Liliev for pursuing a more profitable lane, this decision drew criticism mainly from local fans and followers of arm wrestling in his home region, and in Russia at large. On the 10th of March 2012, Liliev found himself in the final day of the Russian Championships, participating in the final open category showdown. Winning over Kazimurat Zoloev in the first round, Liliev pulled off the seemingly impossible by beating an imposing Denis Seplenkov in the finals and taking the first place victory. It should be noted that Denis had a hard-fought battle with Andrei Pushkar right before though. In 2012, Arsen Liliev, proving that he was still at the top of the sport, entered the Russian A1 Open tournament and battled his way against some of the top arm wrestlers of the time to a first place in the 110+ kg category and third place in the overall right hand category. Not an easy feat, as Denis Seplenkov ended up winning the tournament and Liliev eventually gave up second place to the legendary Andrei Pushkar. That very same year, Arsen had the opportunity to travel to Brazil to participate in the WAF World Championships. Although he was a heavy favorite in his weight class, Liliev ended up losing in a hard-fought battle against the Bulgarian Krasimir Kostadinov in the finals. Liliev also participated in a PAL arm fight super match in June of that same year, taking on Dmitry Trubin, a match he ultimately ended up winning quite convincingly with a 5-1 victory over Trubin. Arsen participated in many more super matches in the previous and following years, and consistently did well, although admittedly they were too numerous to go over in full detail. 1 year on, during the Russian Nationals of 2013, Liliev managed to make it all the way to the finals, but ultimately ended up losing quite convincingly to a monstrous Denis Siplenkov. Later that year, Arsen would once again find himself in hot water with the powers that be. The WAF had been testing a portion of its athletes for performance-enhancing drugs, and had, after an investigation, concluded several participants had tested positive at the 2013 European Championships. Amongst a list of 13 athletes that tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs released by the WAF, alongside well-known names like Gennady Krikvinya and Rustam Babayev, Arsen Liliev was also included and subsequently sanctioned by the Federation. A ban of 2 years was doled out to Liliev, which in hindsight seems to have been one of the main motivating factors for the athlete's eventual retirement from the sport in any competitive sense. One of the last official big-scale tournaments that Arsen would compete in was the independent Azov Fortress, held by organizer Alexander Simonov. Arsen competed in this stacked tournament in 2013 and could freely do so because no formal ties existed between Azov Fortress and the WAF. Liliev ended up taking first place in the open weight category, taking home a then practically unprecedented 50,000 rubles, an amount that was then equivalent to about $1,500 when adjusted against inflation. Despite clearly still being part of the elite in arm wrestling, Liliev would soon after announce his retirement from the sport, citing a wish to spend more time on his personal life, and by extension his family and business, although he would remain on the fringes of the tournament scene, something he did by training promising young athletes and attending major tournaments as a coach and spectator. After a long period of all but radio silence from our protagonist Liliev, with a couple of comebacks rumored but never confirmed, more recently in the spring of 2023, Arsen was a guest on one of Engin's live streams, together with Hermes Gasparini and Pavlo Derbedenev. During the interview, the topic of Arsen participating in East vs West came up, which he didn't seem at all adverse to. Although often having cited financial gain as a primary motivating factor, I believe it should be clear by now that we have seldomly come across someone throwing themselves so fully and unabashedly into the sport as Arsen Liliev. After his 10-year career as a professional arm wrestler, Arsen's resume speaks for itself, and finding a high-tier tournament that he hasn't won during this time is not an easy task. Despite a few hiccups and morally ambiguous decisions made by the bulky Russian, at the end of the day, in my opinion, few people embody pure arm wrestling quite like Arsen. We can only hope he decides, like many others have done lately, to return to the competitive scene and show us once again a glimpse of why he became the legend he is now. Thank you for watching this episode of The Rise and Fall. Make sure to check out all the other episodes I made on various other pullers if you haven't already. And as always, a major shout out to our Armians and Fingerfolk. Until next time, Arm Historian, out.